The text message glowed on my phone screen like a neon sign in the pre-dawn darkness. I'm leaving you. Good luck surviving. I stared at those 8 words, sitting on the edge of our king-size bed in the house my grandfather built with his own hands. Celia's side was cold, sheets pulled tight like she'd never been there at all. The digital clock read 5:47 a.m., and somewhere in the distance a crow cawed from the old oak tree outside our bedroom window. Good luck surviving. I typed back, you too. My name is Elliot Marsh, Eli to everyone in Millfield, Maine. 44 years old, 6'2", with hands that know the difference between 12-gauge wire and 14-gauge by touch alone. I've been running Marsh Electric since my father passed 10 years ago, same company his father started in 1952. We wire houses, fix generators, keep the lights on in this forgotten corner of New England where the paper mill closed and half the downtown storefronts wear for lease signs like battle scars. I'd been married to Celia for 16 years. 16 years of her telling me I wasn't ambitious enough, wasn't social enough, wasn't enough, period. She worked in HR at Millfield General Hospital, made more money than me, and never let me forget it. Now she was gone. I walked downstairs to the kitchen, my bare feet cold against the hardwood floors. The coffee maker sat empty. Celia always made the coffee. I fumbled through the motions, muscle memory from weekend mornings when she slept late. The familiar ritual felt strange, like putting on someone else's clothes. My phone buzzed. Cheryl, my office manager. Eli, we got a problem. Her voice crackled through the speaker. Cheryl Patterson had worked for Marsh Electric longer than I'd owned it, a 60-year-old chain smoker with a mind like a steel trap and a mouth that could strip paint. What kind of problem? Bank called. Our credit lines maxed out. $80,000. They want to talk to Celia about it. I sat down hard in one of our kitchen chairs. Celia? Why Celia? Because it's in her name, boss. All of it. I'm looking at the paperwork right now. She signed as the primary account holder last spring when we needed that line of credit for the Morrison job. The Morrison job. New construction. Biggest contract we'd landed in 5 years. Celia had insisted on handling the paperwork, said her hospital connections made the bank more comfortable. I'd been grateful for her help. Cheryl, check our joint accounts. All of them. Already did. Cleaned out. Checking, savings, even that little emergency fund you thought she didn't know about. I closed my eyes. $46,000 gone. Money I'd saved from 20 years of crawling through attics and basements, fixing other people's electrical problems one outlet at a time. There's something else. Cheryl's voice dropped lower. People are talking. About Celia and that developer, Brady Holt. Brady Holt, new to town, maybe 3 years now. Came up from Boston with big plans and a bigger smile, bought the old Jameson property, and turned it into some kind of architectural magazine fever dream. All glass and steel angles that looked like it belonged in California, not Maine. He'd hired us for some electrical work when he first arrived, always paid on time, always called me buddy, like we'd known each other since childhood. What kind of talking? The kind that says they've been seen together. A lot. At places married women don't usually go with men who aren't their husbands. I hung up and walked to the living room window. Our house sat on 3 acres at the end of Maple Street, far enough from town that you couldn't see your neighbors unless you tried. Celia had always complained about the isolation, said it made her feel trapped. Apparently, she'd found a way out. The landline rang, startling me from my thoughts. Unknown number. Mr. Marsh? This is Janet Collins from First National. We need to speak with your wife about the Marsh Electric credit line. There's been some unusual activity. She's not available. Sir, there's $80,000 outstanding on this account, and we've had several large transfers in the past month. We need to discuss payment arrangements immediately. I almost smiled. Almost. Ma'am, you said the account is in my wife's name? Yes, sir. She's the primary account holder. Then you need to discuss payment arrangements with her. I'm just the electrician. I hung up and poured myself a cup of coffee. It tasted bitter, but I drank it anyway. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Celia. Don't try to find me. It's over. I typed back. Already figured that out. Bank's looking for you, by the way. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then nothing. I called Cheryl back. How bad is it really? Bad, but not impossible. The business account she maxed out? That's her problem, not ours. I've got copies of everything, and your name's nowhere on the liability paperwork. She thought she was being smart, but she screwed herself. And the joint accounts? That's theft, plain and simple. You want to press charges? I thought about it. Celia in handcuffs led away from the hospital in front of all her colleagues. It had a certain appeal, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. Not yet. Let's see how this plays out. Eli, there's one more thing. I've been going through the books, and there's money missing from our operating account, too. Small amounts, but regular. Goes back about 6 months. How much? Maybe 15,000 total. Always transferred to an account I can't trace. I set my coffee cup down carefully, fighting the urge to throw it against the wall. 6 months. She'd been planning this for 6 months, slowly bleeding my business dry while she played house with Brady Holt. Find out where that money went. Already working on it. Give me a day or two. After I hung up, I sat in the silence of the house I'd grown up in. The house where my grandmother had taught me to play chess at the kitchen table, where my father had shown me how to strip wire in the basement workshop, where I'd brought Celia as a new bride and carried her over the threshold like something out of a movie. She'd called it a dump, said it smelled like sawdust and old man dreams. Maybe she was right, but it was my dump, built by my family, paid for with my sweat. And now she thought she could just walk away with everything I'd worked for. I finished my coffee and headed for the shower. I had work to do. The last call sat at the corner of Main and River Streets like a tired old dog that had given up on fetching. Dark wood paneling, neon beer signs, and the kind of atmosphere that made you want to confess your sins or start a fight. Sometimes both. I pushed through the heavy door at exactly 6 p.m., same time I'd been coming here every Friday for the past 8 years. Same stool, same bartender, same routine. Except tonight, everything was different. Heard about Celia, said Tommy Brennan, sliding a Budweiser across the bar without being asked. Tommy had owned the last call for 15 years and heard every secret in Millfield at least twice. Word travels fast. Small town. You okay? I took a long pull from the bottle. Getting there. The bar was filling up with the usual Friday crowd, mill workers, shop owners, guys like me who worked with their hands and drank to forget the ache in their backs. I recognized most of the faces, had wired half their houses over the years. Eli! Jesus, man, I heard. I turned to see Danny Morrison approaching, his face flushed with embarrassment. Danny owned Morrison Construction, the job that had required our big credit line. A good man, paid his bills, never asked for shortcuts. Danny. Listen, if there's anything I can do, after everything with the electrical work on my project, not your fault, Danny. Business is business. He nodded, looking relieved, and moved down the bar. I watched him in the mirror behind the bottles, saw him lean over to whisper something to the guys from Peterson's Hardware. More whispers, more looks in my direction. By 7 o'clock, half the bar knew my story. By 8, I was buying rounds for people I barely knew, playing the part of the wounded husband drowning his sorrows. Let them think I was broken. Let them spread the word. Eli Marsh, right? I turned to find a woman I vaguely recognized. Blonde, early 40s, too much makeup trying to hide too many late nights. She worked at the hospital with Celia, I remembered. Linda? Laura? Lana, she said, reading my confusion. Lana Phillips. I worked with your wife. Worked with? She slid onto the stool next to me, already 3 drinks ahead of me from the look of it. Celia didn't tell you? She got fired yesterday. Well, asked to resign is what they called it. But we all know what that means. I kept my expression neutral, but inside, something cold and satisfied settled in my chest. What happened? Oh, you know, budget cuts. Personnel issues. She leaned closer, bourbon heavy on her breath. Between you and me, I think someone found out about the money. What money? Lana glanced around, then leaned even closer. The transfers. From the hospital accounts. Nothing huge, just, enough to get noticed eventually. I bought her another drink and listened to her talk. Lana Phillips, I learned, was Celia's closest friend at the hospital, and the biggest gossip in a building full of people who traded secrets like baseball cards. She was also bitter about getting passed over for a promotion that went to someone with better connections. Your wife always landed on her feet, Lana continued. Always knew exactly what to say, who to talk to. Made the rest of us look like amateurs. She's good at getting what she wants. Oh, she got it all right. Got herself a sugar daddy with that fancy house and the expensive car. Brady Holt's quite the catch, isn't he? All that money from his Boston deals. I took another sip of beer. They seem happy together. Lana laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Happy? Honey, Brady Holt doesn't do happy. He does convenient. And your wife was very convenient. Hospital contracts, inside information on the expansion project, access to all those lovely accounts. Expansion project? The new wing. $150 million project. Guess who's been bidding on the construction contracts? The pieces started falling into place. Brady's sudden interest in our small town, his friendship with me, his questions about Celia's work. He hadn't been making conversation. He'd been gathering intelligence. Course, now that the hospital knows someone's been leaking information. Lana shrugged. Let's just say Brady's bids aren't looking so attractive anymore. I bought Lana another drink and excused myself to the men's room. In the narrow hallway behind the bar, I pulled out my phone and called Cheryl. Find anything on those transfers? Oh, I found something all right. Money went to an account registered to something called Millfield Development Consulting. Guess who owns that company? Brady Holt. Bingo. But here's the interesting part. The company was set up 6 months ago, right around the time your wife started making those transfers. And according to the state filing, it's got 2 officers, Brady Holt and Celia Marsh. I closed my eyes and counted to 10. She's been working with him from the beginning. Gets better. I did some digging on Mr. Holt's finances. Turns out his Boston deals weren't as successful as he claims. Man's been living on credit and charm for the past 2 years. That fancy house, mortgaged to the hilt, the car, leased. He needed that hospital contract to stay afloat. And now he's not getting it. Nope. And with Celia fired and you controlling the business accounts, his little consulting company just lost its only source of income. I walked back to the bar with a clearer picture of what had happened. Celia and Brady had been planning this for months. Drain my accounts, max out the credit line, disappear together with enough money to start over somewhere else. Except they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd gotten greedy. The hospital money had been too tempting to resist, and now they were both exposed. Celia was unemployed and facing potential criminal charges. Brady was financially ruined and professionally toxic. And I was the wronged husband with a legitimate claim to every penny they'd stolen. I was settling my tab when they walked in. Celia looked different. Hair shorter, clothes more expensive, confidence radiating from every step. She wore a black dress I'd never seen before, and jewelry that cost more than most people in Millfield made in a month. Brady followed behind her, his hand possessive on her lower back, his smile as bright and fake as a game show host's. The bar went quiet. Not movie quiet, but that subtle shift that happens when something interesting is about to unfold. Conversations continued, but voices dropped, and I could feel eyes moving between me and the couple who'd just announced their affair to the entire room. Brady spotted me first. His smile never wavered, but something flickered behind his eyes. Calculation, maybe, or fear. "Eli!" "Buddy, how are you holding up?" I turned slowly, beer bottle still in my hand. Brady, Celia, my wife, ex-wife, looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Eli, I hope we can be civilized about this." Civilized. I tasted the word like it was something bitter. "Sure, Celia. We can be civilized." Brady clapped me on the shoulder, his grip just a little too tight. "Look, man, I know this is awkward, but these things happen. Adults, right? We can handle this like adults." I looked at his hand on my shoulder, then up at his face. Adults, right. Like adults who steal money from joint accounts. Like adults who max out business credit lines. Like adults who embezzle from hospitals. The color drained from Brady's face. Celia's composure cracked, just for a second before she rebuilt it. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said. "Sure you don't." I finished my beer and set the bottle down carefully. "Enjoy your evening, folks. Both of you." I walked toward the door, feeling their eyes on my back. Behind me, I heard Brady's voice, lower now, urgent. "What the hell is he talking about, Celia?" I smiled as I pushed through the door into the cold Maine night. Let them worry. Let them wonder what I knew and what I was planning to do about it. The real fun was just getting started. Saturday morning came gray and bitter, the kind of October day that promises winter and delivers on the threat. I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and reading the local paper, a ritual that felt different now that I was reading it alone. The phone rang at exactly 9 a.m. "Eli, it's Janet Collins from First National. We've been trying to reach your wife about the credit line situation." "Still not my problem, Janet." "Mr. Marsh, I understand you're going through a difficult time, but we need to resolve this. The account shows several large purchases in the past week. Furniture, electronics, even a car down payment. The balance is now approaching $90,000. I set down my coffee cup. She's still spending? Yesterday alone, there were charges totaling $8,000 at various stores in Portland. Mr. Marsh, if we can't reach Mrs. Marsh soon, we'll have to take legal action." "You do what you need to do, Janet. But remember, that account is in her name, not mine." After I hung up, I called Cheryl. "Can you meet me at the office? We need to talk." Marsh Electric occupied a converted garage on Industrial Road, nothing fancy but functional. 2 service trucks, a small office, and a workshop where I kept enough supplies to handle most jobs without special ordering. Cheryl's desk sat in the front corner, positioned so she could see everyone who came through the door. She was waiting with a pot of coffee and a manila folder thick with papers. "Thought you'd want to see this," she said, sliding the folder across her desk. Took some doing, but I traced every penny. I opened the folder and found bank statements, transfer records, and photocopied checks. The paper trail painted a clear picture. Celia had been systematically looting our accounts for 6 months, moving money in small amounts to avoid triggering automatic alerts. The business credit line had been her final score, one big grab before disappearing. Total damage? $123,000 give or take. That includes the joint accounts, the business transfers, and what she spent since she left. I whistled low. She's been busy. Gets more interesting. I called my cousin who works at the bank in Portland. Guess what Brady Holt did yesterday morning? Surprised me. Tried to get a cash advance on 3 different credit cards. All declined. Then tried to open a new account with a cash deposit. Turned out to be a bad check from that consulting company. I leaned back in my chair. They're broke. Broker than broke, and desperate. My cousin says Brady was sweating bullets, kept checking his phone like he was expecting bad news. He was. The hospital contract fell through. Celia lost her job, and now the bank's hunting them for $90,000 they don't have. Cheryl grinned, an expression that transformed her weathered face into something almost predatory. "So what's the plan, boss?" I'd been thinking about that question all morning. The smart play would be to let the system handle it, press charges, let the bank sue them, watch them get buried under legal fees and criminal prosecution. But that felt too passive, too clean. They'd planned this betrayal for months, systematically destroying everything I'd built while pretending to love me. They deserved something more personal. First, we protect the business. Transfer everything to new accounts they can't touch. Then we start applying pressure. What kind of pressure? I smiled, and Cheryl's grin got wider. The kind this town specializes in. By noon, I was parked across the street from Brady's architectural showpiece, watching through binoculars as he loaded boxes into the back of a rented U-Haul truck. Celia stood in the doorway directing traffic, wearing jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payments. They were running. I called Tommy at the last call. "Hey, it's Eli. You know that story about Celia and Brady? The one that's been making the rounds?" "Yeah? Might want to add a new chapter. Word is they're skipping town today. Something about unpaid debts and angry creditors." "No kidding?" "No kidding. Thought people might be interested." Tommy chuckled. "I'll make sure the word gets out." Next, I called Danny Morrison. "Danny, it's Eli Marsh. You know that Brady Holt, who's been bidding on your projects?" "Yeah, what about him?" "Might want to check his references real careful. I'm hearing some disturbing stories about his financial situation." "What kind of stories?" "The kind that involve bad checks and maxed-out credit cards." "Just thought you should know." I made 6 more calls, each one carefully crafted to sound like friendly advice from a concerned neighbor. By the time I was finished, half the town would know that Brady Holt was financially ruined and fleeing Millfield with a married woman and a pile of stolen money. In a place like Millfield, reputation was everything. Once you lost it, you never got it back. My phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. "Stop spreading lies or you'll regret it." I typed back, "Truth isn't lies, Brady. Ask your banker." No response. I drove home and spent the afternoon in my workshop, a converted barn behind the house where I kept my serious tools and worked on projects that required space and silence. The familiar smell of sawdust and motor oil helped me think, and I had a lot of thinking to do. Celia and Brady had made their move, but they'd underestimated their opponent. They saw a small-town electrician, someone they could manipulate and abandon without consequences. They didn't see the man who'd survived 2 tours in Afghanistan before coming home to build a business from nothing. They didn't see someone who understood patience, planning, and the value of choosing your battles carefully. Most importantly, they didn't understand Millfield. This wasn't Boston or Portland, where you could disappear into anonymity. This was a town where everyone knew everyone else's business, where reputation mattered more than money, and where betraying a neighbor was the kind of sin that followed you forever. I was cleaning my tools when headlights swept across the workshop windows. A car door slammed, followed by the sound of expensive heels on gravel. Celia stood in the doorway, her perfect composure finally cracked. Dark circles under her eyes, hair disheveled, the confident woman from the bar replaced by someone who looked desperate and afraid. "We need to talk." I continued cleaning my socket wrench set, not looking up. "Nothing to talk about, Celia." "You made your choice. The bank called Brady. They're threatening to press charges. Good for them." She stepped into the workshop, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. "Eli, please. I know you're angry, but this has gone far enough." "Has it?" I set down my tools and looked at her directly for the first time. "You spent 6 months planning to destroy me. 6 months stealing my money, lying to my face, sleeping with another man while pretending to be my wife. And you think 3 days is far enough? It wasn't supposed to happen this way." "How was it supposed to happen, Celia?" "You and Brady were going to ride off into the sunset with my money and live happily ever after?" Was I supposed to just quietly disappear? She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly looking smaller. Brady said you'd never figure it out. Said you were too trusting, too stupid to see what was happening. Brady said that, did he? He promised me we'd be careful, that we'd only take what we needed to start over. But then the hospital contract fell through, and he needed more money. So, you cleaned out our accounts? I panicked. He said it was temporary, that he'd pay it all back once his next deal came through. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Celia, Brady doesn't have any deals. He's broke. Has been for years. You didn't run away with a successful businessman. You ran away with a con man who saw you coming from a mile away. The color drained from her face. That's not true. Ask him about the mortgage on that fancy house. Ask him about the lease payments on his car. Ask him about the 3 credit cards he tried to max out yesterday. She stared at me, pieces falling into place behind her eyes. How do you know all that? Same way I know about the consulting company you set up together. Same way I know about the hospital money you've been stealing. Same way I know you're both about to be arrested for embezzlement. Celia sank into an old chair I kept in the corner, her face in her hands. Oh God, what have I done? You chose Brady Holt over 16 years of marriage. You chose easy money over honest work. You chose to burn down everything we built together. I picked up another tool, examining it in the light. Now you get to live with those choices. Eli, please, I'll pay it all back. I'll do whatever it takes. With what money, Celia? You're unemployed. Brady's broke. The bank wants $90,000 you don't have. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I made a mistake. No, I said quietly. You made a choice. 100 different choices, every day for 6 months. This isn't a mistake, it's who you really are. She stood up slowly, dignity returning like armor. Fine. But this isn't over, Eli. Brady has lawyers, connections. We'll fight this. Good luck with that. But remember, I'm not the one who stole the money. I'm not the one who's about to be arrested. I'm just the electrician who trusted the wrong woman. She walked to the doorway, then turned back. You used to be kind. I used to be stupid. Fortunately, that's curable. After she left, I sat in the workshop for a long time, listening to the silence. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. Sunday morning brought rain and the kind of phone call that makes you smile before you're fully awake. Eli? It's Sheriff Greeley. Got a minute? Bill Greeley had been sheriff of Millfield for 12 years, a steady man who understood that sometimes the law was less important than justice. We'd served in the same unit overseas, different tours, but same mud, same memories. What can I do for you, Bill? Had an interesting conversation with Janet Collins at the bank yesterday. Seems your wife and her boyfriend have been busy little bees. I poured coffee and settled into my kitchen chair. So I hear. Banks pressing charges, embezzlement, fraud, theft by deception. Could be looking at serious jail time if they're convicted. That's unfortunate. Bill chuckled. Yeah, you sound real broken up about it. Listen, I need to ask, you have any idea where they might be hiding? Last I saw them, they were loading a U-Haul truck. That was yesterday afternoon. Truck's been found. Abandoned at a rest stop in New Hampshire, empty. No sign of your wife or Holt. I set down my coffee cup. They ran. Looks like it. But here's the thing, Eli. Running just makes it worse. FBI gets involved with interstate flight, charges multiply, and when they do get caught, judges don't look kindly on people who try to skip out on their debts. Seems like they're making one bad decision after another. Pattern of behavior. Speaking of which, I've been hearing some interesting stories around town. Stories about Brady Holt's financial situation, his business practices, that sort of thing. People talk. They do indeed. And sometimes that talk reaches the right ears. like the ears of other law enforcement agencies who might be investigating similar complaints in other towns. I waited. Bill wasn't the type to waste words. Turns out, Mr. Holt's been running the same game in 3 different states over the past 5 years. New town, new identity, new victims. Real estate development, construction consulting, always the same pattern. Get close to local officials, gather inside information, make promises he can't keep. Interesting? Very. And now that his real name's in the system, connected to real charges, those other jurisdictions are taking a fresh look at some cold cases. After Bill hung up, I sat in my kitchen thinking about patterns and consequences. Celia had thought she was running away with a charming businessman. Instead, she'd tied herself to a career criminal who was about to become the subject of a multi-state investigation. The phone rang again. Cheryl. Boss, you need to see the paper. What paper? All of them. Portland Press-Herald, Bangor Daily News, even the Boston Globe picked it up. Hospital employee and developer flee after embezzlement charges. They're famous. I drove to town and bought copies of every paper I could find. The story was front-page news in Maine, buried deeper in the Boston paper, but still there. Photos of Celia and Brady, details about the stolen money, quotes from hospital administrators about betrayed trust and thorough investigations. By the time I reached the office, my phone was ringing constantly. Reporters wanting comments, neighbors offering sympathy, customers asking if the business was still operating. I let Cheryl handle most of it while I worked on the real project. Marsh Electric, this is Cheryl. No, Mr. Marsh is not available for comment. No, the business is operating normally. Yes, we're accepting new customers. She hung up and looked at me. That was the 5th reporter in an hour. This story's got legs. Good. The more attention, the harder it gets for them to hide. I spent the morning calling every contractor, supplier, and business contact I'd built relationships with over the years. Not to gossip, I was careful about that, but to make sure everyone understood that Marsh Electric was stable, reliable, and completely separate from my wife's criminal activities. The response was overwhelmingly supportive. Danny Morrison called to offer a new contract. Peterson's Hardware extended our credit terms. Even the bank called to discuss expanding our business line of credit, now that the liability issues were resolved. By noon, I had more work lined up than I could handle in 6 months. Funny thing about small towns, Cheryl observed, watching me hang up from another supportive call. People rally around their own when times get tough. Especially when they think someone's been wronged. You have been wronged. Yes, but now everyone knows it. There's a difference. The afternoon brought a different kind of call. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. Eli, it's Brady. We need to talk. Do we? Look, I know you're angry, but this situation's gotten out of hand. The media attention, the police involvement, it's not helping anyone. I leaned back in my chair. Seems to be helping me just fine. Business is booming. Very funny. Listen, I've got lawyers working on this. Good lawyers. They're saying we can make a deal, pay back the money, avoid jail time, but we need your cooperation. My cooperation? Don't press charges. Tell the bank you want to handle this privately. Give us time to liquidate some assets and pay everything back. What assets would those be, Brady? The house you don't own? The car you can't afford? The business that doesn't exist? Silence on the other end. Here's the thing, Brady. I've done some research on you. Turns out you've been running this same scam for years. Different towns, different victims, but always the same pattern. Find a lonely woman with access to money, promise her a better life, clean out her accounts, and disappear. That's not what happened here, isn't it? You targeted Celia because she worked at the hospital. You got close to her because she had access to inside information about the construction contracts. You convinced her to steal money from our accounts to fund your fake consulting business. And when the hospital deal fell through, you cleaned out everything you could reach and tried to run. More silence. The only difference this time is that you picked the wrong victim. Celia wasn't some lonely widow with more money than sense. She was married to someone who knows how to fight back. Eli, please, Celia's scared. She's never been in trouble before, doesn't understand what's happening. She understood enough to steal $120,000. That was my idea, not hers. I convinced her to do it. I almost laughed. You're trying to take responsibility? That's noble, Brady, but it's too late. The charges are filed, the warrants are issued, and every cop in New England has your pictures. There has to be something we can work out. There is. Turn yourselves in. Cooperate with the investigation. Maybe the prosecutor will consider a plea deal. You know we can't do that. Then, you know what happens next. I hung up and immediately called Sheriff Greeley. Bill, Brady Holt just called me. Sounds like they're still in the area, maybe looking for a way out. We'll trace the call. Thanks for the heads up. One more thing, he mentioned lawyers. Good ones. Someone's funding their defense. Interesting. I'll look into that. That evening, I drove to the last call for my usual Friday drink, even though it was Sunday. The bar was quieter than usual, but the conversation stopped when I walked in. Tommy nodded toward my usual stool. Beer? Please. I'd barely sat down when Lana Phillips appeared beside me, looking worse than she had on Friday. Bloodshot eyes, shaking hands, the kind of desperation that comes from watching your world collapse in real time. Eli, thank God you're here. I need to talk to you. About what? About Celia. About the hospital. About all of it. She looked around nervously. Not here. Too many ears. I paid for my beer and followed her outside to the parking lot. She lit a cigarette with trembling fingers. They fired me. I'm sorry to hear that. No, you don't understand. They fired me because of Celia, because I knew about the money transfers and didn't report them. I waited. She told me it was for you. Said you were having business problems, needed temporary help with cash flow. She made it sound like she was being a good wife, supporting her husband. And you believed her. I wanted to believe her. Celia was my friend, my only real friend at that place. When she asked me to help process the transfers, to keep them quiet, she took a long drag from her cigarette. I should have known better. What do you want from me, Lana? I want you to know I'm sorry. I want you to know I never meant for this to happen. And I want you to know that Celia's not the person you think she is. What do you mean? This wasn't her first time. The money transfers, the inside information, she's been doing it for years. Small amounts, careful timing, always with some excuse about helping family or covering emergencies. I thought it was just creative accounting. The pieces fell into place. How much, Lana? Over the years, how much? Maybe 50,000. Maybe more. Always into that consulting account. Which means Brady's been planning this for longer than 6 months. She nodded. Celia introduced me to him at a hospital fundraiser 2 years ago. Charming guy. Asked a lot of questions about hospital operations, construction plans, staffing budgets. I thought he was just making conversation. He was gathering intelligence. The whole time. And Celia was feeding him information, helping him position his bids, giving him advantages over other contractors. I thought about the timeline. 2 years of preparation, systematic theft, careful manipulation. This wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated business plan with my wife as the inside accomplice. Why are you telling me this, Lana? Because they're going to try to pin everything on me. I processed the transfers. I had access to the accounts. I knew what was happening. When they get caught, I'm going to be the fall guy. Maybe you should have thought of that before you helped them steal money. I know I screwed up. But Eli, I'm a single mother with 2 kids. I can't go to prison. I can't lose everything because I trusted the wrong person. I looked at her for a long moment, seeing desperation and genuine fear. What do you want me to do about it? Help me. Talk to the prosecutor, tell them I was manipulated, that I thought I was helping a friend. I'll testify against Celia and Brady, tell them everything I know. Everything? Everything. The real timeline, the other thefts, the hospital insider information, all of it. I thought about it. Lana's testimony would destroy any chance Celia and Brady had of claiming this was a misunderstanding or a moment of poor judgment. It would expose the full scope of their operation and guarantee serious prison time. I'll think about it. Thank you. That's all I can ask. I drove home through the dark Maine countryside, past houses where honest people were settling in for the night, past businesses built by families who'd worked for generations to create something lasting. Celia and Brady had tried to steal that from me, tried to reduce 20 years of work to numbers in their bank accounts. But they'd made a crucial mistake. They'd underestimated the power of community, the strength that comes from having roots in a place where people know your name and remember your father. Tomorrow, the real consequences would begin. The call came at 6 a.m. Tuesday morning, jolting me from the first decent sleep I'd had in a week. Eli, it's Bill Greeley. We got them. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. Where? Motel outside Albany, acting on a tip from someone who recognized them from the news coverage. They're being held on the federal warrants, interstate flight, wire fraud, the works. How do they look? Bill chuckled. Like two people who've been sleeping in their car for 3 days. Celia was crying when they brought her in. Brady was trying to cut a deal before they finished reading his rights. When do they come back to Maine? Extradition hearings Thursday. My guess is they'll waive and come back voluntarily. Fighting it just makes everything worse. After Bill hung up, I made coffee and sat in my kitchen watching the sunrise through the window. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a married man with a stable business and what I thought was a secure future. Now I was single, richer than I'd ever been, and watching my enemies face federal charges that could put them away for years. The phone rang again. Cheryl. Boss, you see the news? Bill called. They caught them. Not just that. Turn on Channel 8. I found the remote and flipped to the local morning show. There was Brady's mugshot, looking haggard and desperate, followed by Celia's, her perfect makeup gone, her confident expression replaced by something that looked like terror. The reporter's voice was crisp and professional. The couple accused of embezzling over $200,000 from local businesses and Millfield General Hospital were arrested yesterday evening at a motel in Albany, New York. Brady Holt, 38, and Celia Marsh, 42, are facing federal charges including wire fraud, interstate transportation of stolen property, and conspiracy. 200,000. The number had grown. In a related development, hospital administrators announced that their internal investigation has uncovered evidence of systematic theft dating back 3 years, with total losses now estimated at over $300,000. I turned off the TV and called Bill back. 300,000? Hospital's been busy. Turns out your wife had access to a lot more accounts than anyone realized. Payroll, vendor payments, construction deposits, she was skimming from everything. And Brady? Brady's got problems in 4 states now. Similar complaints, similar patterns. FBI's calling it a multi-jurisdictional organized crime investigation. Organized crime. Celia had gone from small-town hospital administrator to federal criminal in less than a month. There's something else, Eli. Lana Phillips wants to make a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. Her lawyer called the prosecutor this morning. What kind of cooperation? Everything. Financial records, communication logs, details about the hospital thefts going back 3 years. She's got documentation Brady thought he'd destroyed. I thought about my conversation with Lana in the parking lot. Desperate people make dangerous allies, but they also make effective witnesses. Bill, I want to be there when they bring them back. Courthouse Thursday at 2 p.m. But Eli, no scenes, no confrontations. This is a legal proceeding, not a chance for revenge. Understood. Thursday afternoon, I sat in the back row of the Millfield courthouse watching my wife and her lover face a federal judge. Celia wore an orange jumpsuit that made her look pale and fragile. Brady sat beside her, his expensive haircut and manicured nails looking absurd in the institutional setting. The prosecutor was a sharp young woman from the U.S. Attorney's office who laid out the charges with clinical precision: wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy, interstate flight, each count carrying potential sentences that added up to decades in federal prison. Celia's lawyer, a tired-looking public defender, entered a plea of not guilty and requested reasonable bail. Brady's lawyer, expensive suit, confident manner, made a similar request while hinting at his client's willingness to cooperate with ongoing investigations. The judge, a gray-haired woman with the kind of expression that suggested she'd seen every variation of human stupidity, set bail at $500,000 each. Your Honor, Brady's lawyer stood up. My client has significant assets that can be liquidated to secure bail. What assets would those be, Counselor? According to the pretrial report, Mr. Holt's house is in foreclosure, his vehicles are being repossessed, and his business accounts are frozen. We're exploring options, Your Honor. Explore them from jail. Bail stands as set. I watched them led away in handcuffs, Celia looking back once toward the gallery. Our eyes met for a moment, and I saw something that might have been regret or might have been hatred. Then she was gone, and I was walking out into the October sunshine as a free man. The next morning brought a knock on my door. I opened it to find a woman in her 30s, professionally dressed, with the kind of smile that meant business. Mr. Marsh? I'm Sarah Chen from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Could we talk? I invited her in and made coffee while she arranged papers on my kitchen table. Mr. Marsh, I'm going to be direct with you. This case is bigger than just your wife and Brady Holt. We're looking at a multi-state conspiracy involving fraud, money laundering, and organized theft. We need your help. What kind of help? Testimony about the timeline, the financial manipulation, the systematic nature of the theft. You were closer to this than anyone. You saw the patterns, the changes in behavior, the gradual escalation. I thought about it. What happens to them if I testify? If convicted on all counts? 20 to 30 years in federal prison. No parole on federal sentences, Mr. Marsh. They'd serve every day, 20 to 30 years. Celia would be in her 70s when she got out. Brady might never see freedom again. There's something else, Sarah continued. We're prepared to recommend full restitution as part of any plea agreement. Every penny they stole, plus interest and penalties. The hospital's insurance will cover their losses, but your personal damages would be paid directly. How much are we talking about? Based on our accounting, approximately $400,000. That includes the direct theft, the credit line fraud, and punitive damages. $400,000. More money than I'd ever dreamed of having. What do I have to do? Tell the truth about what you observed, what you discovered, how they manipulated you and others. Help us show the jury that this wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a calculated criminal enterprise. I signed the cooperation agreement that afternoon. The trial began 6 months later, in the spring, when Millfield was shaking off winter and remembering how to be green again. I testified for 2 days, walking the jury through the timeline of discovery, the systematic theft, the careful manipulation that had nearly destroyed my business and my life. Celia's lawyer tried to paint me as a vindictive ex-husband seeking revenge, but the financial record spoke louder than his arguments. Brady's lawyer attempted to shift all blame to Celia, claiming his client was manipulated by a desperate woman, but Lana Phillips's testimony demolished that defense. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours, guilty on all counts. Sentencing came 2 months later. I sat in the same back row, watching the judge deliver the consequences of their choices. Brady Holt, 25 years in federal prison, full restitution, lifetime ban from financial services. Celia Marsh, 18 years in federal prison, full restitution, forfeiture of all assets. As they led her away for the final time, Celia looked back at me again. This time, I saw only defeat. I walked out of that courthouse into a perfect Maine morning, breathing air that tasted like freedom and justice. My phone buzzed with a text from Cheryl. New contract came in. Morrison's building 12 houses this summer. Wants us to wire all of them. I smiled and typed back, "Tell him yes." The debt was paid, in full.